In this last supplement about the Buddhist concept of not-self, anatman, I'll review the notion of dharmas, dhammas in Pali, and how they became a major part of the belief system in some Buddhist schools, including Theravada. I'll also discuss what different Buddhist schools think transfers into the afterlife. As mentioned before, after the Buddha died, Buddhist communities gradually came to realize that they had different views about what the Buddha meant on numerous important subjects. Recall that at the Second Buddhist Council, the Buddhist community split into two factions: the elder community, called the Theravada in Sanskrit, and the great community, the Mahasamgika. Some 130 years later, there was need for a third Buddhist council as different views continued to arise. At this council, a subgroup of elders calling themselves those who make distinctions, the Vibhajyavadins, rejected the views of other groups present, which we'll discuss at the end of this supplement. This distinctions group received the royal patronage of King Ashoka, who reigned from Pataliputra, adjacent to modern-day Patna, on the Ganges approaching Bangladesh. Ashoka helped disseminate the views of the distinctions group throughout much of India. A branch of those who make distinctions, living in southern India and Sri Lanka, eventually became known as Theravadins. Thus, Theravadins trace their heritage back to the group called those who make distinctions. Their beliefs are shown at right, but here we'll focus on what is arguably the most important belief, dharmas, or dhammas in Pali. Around the time of the Third Buddhist Council, monk scholars from different communities began to put together different technical oral understandings of their beliefs, called Abhidharmas, meaning about the Dharma, teachings. They held that these understandings explained the true, often hidden meaning of the Buddha's sermons. Each community, with monk scholars open and able to take on the task, developed their own Abhidharma to define their philosophical positions and debate rival schools. As mentioned earlier, one point of controversy was the nature and meaning of what is called dharmas. The Sanskrit word dharma and the Pali word dhamma is derived from root words which mean support or foundation. In common Buddhist usage, however, the word simply refers to the Buddha's teachings, which expresses the truth of cosmic law. In several places, however, the Buddha used the word in another way. For example, in the middle discourses, when the Buddha said, "When they know an idea with their mind, if it's pleasant, they desire it, but if it's unpleasant, they dislike it," the word used for idea, arising from an object presented to awareness to process, is dharma. Similarly, when the Buddha said, "There are the sense fields of sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, and ideas," the word used for idea, again, that is, arising from objects presented to awareness to process, is dharma, which, along with the other sensory phenomena, are ever-changing, and so, according to the Buddha's teaching, cannot be self. At some point, monk scholars in the distinction tradition gradually developed a more technical understanding of dharmas. They asked, if the person cannot ultimately be found in the aggregates, as the Buddha said, does the person exist in the foundational moments, dharmas, of experience itself? Here the word dharma goes back to its meaning of foundation, thus neither referring to the teachings nor just to mental ideas, but to what they considered ultimate building blocks of existence that make up our experience of reality. The monks in the Distinctions group viewed the five aggregates as being composed of dharmas as follows. The form dharma, of earth, water, fire, wind, sense bases, and sense objects, together make up the form aggregate. The feeling dharmas of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feeling together make up the feeling aggregate. The perception dharmas recognize and mark features of what appears, allowing experiences to be distinguished and identified, and together make up the perception aggregate. The mental formation dharmas include the many mental activities involved in intending, imagining, evaluating, and forming habits, which together make up the mental formation aggregate. The consciousness dharmas are the moments of sensory and mental awareness, arising dependent on conditions, which together make up the consciousness aggregate. Each of these dharma types composing the five aggregates are considered ultimate because they cannot be further resolved within the analysis of experience, and each possesses a specific characteristic. In analyzing these dharmas, the monks in this distinction tradition found no distinct characteristic of a self. It is never encountered as an observable factor alongside the various physical and mental events that constitute experience. They therefore concluded that self is a conventional designation applied to the stream, not an ultimately existing subject that owns or contains the stream. This position arises when one translates an Atman as no self rather than not self, and then takes the translation literally. There can be no self at all, only the stream. Some Buddhist schools and modern scholars have questioned whether this conclusion necessarily follows. While no separate self appears among the dharmas, this does not establish that there is no subject for whom the dharmas arise. The reality of an experiencer cannot be ruled out. If it is, then the question arises, who attains nirvana if there is no self? The Theravada position is that nirvana occurs when greed, hatred, and delusion are extinguished within that changing stream of physical and mental phenomena. Here again, opponents would object that there must still be a self experiencing nirvana. Strange though it sounds, those in the distinction Theravadin group maintain that there is realization of nirvana, but no ultimately real experiencer standing behind that realization. This brings us back to the chariot analogy. The monks in the distinction group, developing the line of thought that would eventually be called Theravada position, argued that the parts of the chariot are the ultimate objects of analysis, and the word chariot only applies to an arrangement of parts. In the same way, they argue that what we call the self is just a name imposed upon a succession of the five types of conditioned dharmas. Similarly, the flame analogy is often used in Theravada to show how continuity need not imply an enduring essence. A flame appears continuous, but is really a succession of fresh burnings, each conditioned by the one before it. Likewise, they would say, a person is the conventional designation applied to a continually changing stream of conditioned dharmas. Critics, however, argue that the analogy merely relocates the problem. A flame still exists as a unified phenomena, despite being analyzable into successive burnings. Likewise, they contend that a person exists as a unified subject of experience, despite being analyzable into conditioned physical and mental events. This whole stream of what became Theravada thought raises another question. If we are only a conditioned succession of dharmas, what becomes of agency? While we have no control over the sensory apparatus through which experience arises, we can plainly decide on our responses. The Noble Eightfold Path, with its emphasis on right intention, speech, action, livelihood, and effort, make this clear. The Theravada answer is not that some hidden self directs the process, but that conditioned mental factors, such as volition, attention, and mindfulness, shape the conditions from which later action arises. Agency, then, is said to function without any enduring agent behind it. There are deep philosophical concerns about the Theravada position. It treats dharmas as the ultimate causal realities of experience and locates agency within their conditioned arising rather than in a persisting self. But if dharmas are causal agents, has selfhood merely been reassigned to dharmas? And does this theory of dharmas as causal agents follow inevitably from the Buddha's teaching that we should not say, "This is mine, I am this is myself"? Critics note that the theory of dharmas may go beyond the pragmatic instructions of the Buddha and lapse into metaphysical speculation, something the Buddha was disinclined to do. The Buddha's teaching was aimed at relieving suffering by discarding possessive identification. Later views that analyze the person as a stream of momentary dharmas may illuminate experience in important ways, but they also raise the question of whether they preserve that original therapeutic aim or transform it into a theory of what ultimately exists. Having developed in their Abhidharma the concept of dharmas, those shaping what would become Theravada needed to explain continuity across death without positing a permanent self. Having analyzed the person as a succession of momentary conditioned dharmas, like a flame whose apparent continuity depends upon fuel that is presented, burns, and is no more, monk scholars in this tradition reason that, at death, the flame conventionally designated as self goes out. It is, however, immediately reignited in a new existence through karmic causal continuity. This new flame, they held, is neither the same flame nor entirely different. It is similar in that it arises conditioned by the preceding stream of dharmas, yet different because it arises anew under fresh conditions. They also held, as you've seen, that different karmic conditions produce different outcomes. Unwholesome karma leads to rebirth in lower realms like hell, animal, or the ghost states. Wholesome karma leads to human or heavenly rebirth. Deep meditative attainments lead to refined Brahma realms, and full awakening leads to no further rebirth. Sometime around the 3rd century BCE, around the same time that teachings about dharmas were taking shape among the scholars that would become known as Theravada, different Buddhist traditions developed competing interpretations. A group of monk scholars in northwest India, known as the Sarvastivadin, accepted the idea that dharmas are the ultimate constituents of reality, but differed sharply from the Theravada in how these dharmas exist and operate across time. The Theravada held that only present dharmas exist. A dharma arises, performs its function, and ceases. Past dharmas no longer exist, and future dharmas do not yet exist. Their causal influence continues only by conditioning the arising of new dharmas in the next moment. Think of it as a wave moving across the ocean. At any given moment, there's only the present shape of the wave. Past shapes no longer exist. though the present shape was conditioned by the previous shape. The Sarvastivadin position held that dharmas of past, present, and future all exist in some sense, hence their name, meaning the doctrine that all exist. Present dharmas alone are causally active, but past and future dharmas also exist. The analogy is of a piece of film. Only the present is being projected, but the frames before and after nevertheless exist. This allowed them to explain memory, karmic continuity, and causal connection across time, without reducing these to mere traces left behind by vanished events. For the Sarvastivadin, the past still is. For the Theravadin, the past was, but its effects remain. As an interesting aside, the theory that all events, past, present, and future, are equally real and exist simultaneously is called the block universe theory and was championed by Albert Einstein, who said that the idea that time flows is a stubbornly persistent illusion. As to what happens when you die, the All Exist group held that yourself does not carry on, only the causal continuity of conditioned dharmas persist, giving rise to future experience. A group living in the central Ganges region of India in the 3rd century BCE, called the Vatsiputriya, meaning followers of Vatsiputra, the son of Vasta, rejected both the Theravada and the Sarvastivadin concept of dharmas. The followers of Vatsiputra eventually split into 4 related groups, with all 5 commonly referred to as Pudgalavada, teachers of the person, since Pudgala means person. These schools held that a person cannot be reduced entirely to the aggregates or to a mere stream of dharmas. To them, a person, the Pudgala, was neither the same nor entirely different from the 5 aggregates. They held that at death, the aggregates of this life dissolve and the person continues by depending on past karma and conditions taking hold in a new aggregate stream. The person, Pudgala, at death, is not other than the past aggregates as it depends on them and cannot exist without them, but neither is it the same, as conditions are now radically different. In the new life destined for rebirth, a new stream of 5 aggregates arises, as experience is now different. Thus the person to be reborn is neither the same nor different from the one who died. Unlike the Theravada view, the Pudgalavada version holds that the one who acted in a past life is meaningfully related to the one who experiences karmic results in the afterlife, thus preserving moral responsibility. Opponents accuse the Pudgalavadins of smuggling a self back into Buddhism. The Pudgalavadins held that they were just acknowledging the irreducible reality of personal continuity that purely momentary Dharma theory cannot adequately explain. They would note that the Buddha did not straightforwardly declare that there is no self. Rather, he dismantled fixed views about self by showing that whatever we identify as self is conditioned and not fit to be regarded as I or mine. As mentioned in the main section on Anatman, Yogachara means the school of those who practice yoga, where yoga means to harness or train the mind. Arising about the time of Christ, this group denied the existence of a permanent self, but unlike the group that became Theravadins, Yogacharans did not think that continuity within and across lives can be explained through a stream of momentary dharmas alone. They held that each individual has their own continuously flowing, conditioned consciousness, fed by sensory inputs, which retains karmic seeds that serves as the basis for rebirth and karmic maturation. They called this storehouse consciousness. While there is no permanent self in Yogachara, as storehouse consciousness within each individual is ever-changing and not eternal, it acts as the agent carrying karma forward. The middle way, the Madhyamaka of Nagarjuna, who lived around the year 200 of the Common Era, holds that everything is empty of inherent nature. Beings, actions, that is karma, and the results arise dependently upon causes and conditions. Since nothing has inherent independent existence, karma functions dependently within this causal continuum and, like everything else, is empty of an independent nature. Like Theravadins, Nagarjuna rejected the belief that there is an inherent self, but unlike Theravadins, he held that there is no ultimate dharmas. Dharmas also arise dependently and are empty of inherent existence. Thus, they are not foundational and cannot carry karma. The rest of this diagram presents the Theravada, Pudgalavada, and the Yogachara views. As just noted, Nagarjuna rejected the Theravada view that dharmas are the ultimate building blocks that carry karma. He also rejected the Pudgalavada view that there is a person, Pudgala, that carries karma forward, and the Yogachara view that storehouse consciousness carries karma forward. Also, as mentioned in the main section on Anatman, those holding the Tathagatagarbha teachings, which emerged in the 2nd and 3rd centuries of the Common Era, believe that all beings possess an intrinsic Buddha nature. Whether this amounts to a self is debated, but it is clear that these traditions shifted attention away from the Abhidharma search for the ultimate reality in momentary dharmas and toward an ever-present capacity for Buddhahood concealed beneath ignorance and defilements. As mentioned earlier, Pure Land Buddhism is focused on trust in the vows of Amitabha, who was once a monk who vowed to create a heavenly home for anyone who called on him. Those who do so with devotion and sincerity are reborn in the land of bliss. Pure Land Buddhism does not have a binding view on dharmas, though different subgroups may express ideas usually borrowed from other Mahayana traditions. We can now leave our discussion of Anatman and go on to investigate the Buddhist concept of nirvana.